Ferrari has brought something to Miami that the rest of the grid did not see coming. Charles Leclerc sits in a car that could either deliver Maranello's breakthrough or ignite Formula One's most contentious technical debate. A single garage image triggered emergency meetings among rival teams. What they saw was not a new wing, it was a reinterpretation of exhaust regulations so precise it might force the FIA to act before the checkered flag. Beneath the SF26 lies a system that weaponizes exhaust gases. A small rearward flap integrated with a repositioned differential creates an aerodynamic effect thought extinct. Early simulation data suggests Ferrari gained 0.3 seconds in Sector 2 from exhaust flow alone. But here's what the paddock is not talking about. The system only works within a narrow engine mapping window. If Ferrari's interpretation stands, they gain an edge rivals cannot copy mid-season. If challenged, the championship narrative shifts overnight. Miami becomes a referendum on innovation itself, and that is where this story gets complicated. To understand why Ferrari believes this system is legal, we need to look at the regulatory chessboard they are playing on. Ferrari's legal team spent 18 months stress testing a single interpretation. They found a gap in Article 5.8.2 governing exhaust positioning that says nothing about post-exit gas flow. The 2026 regulations eliminated the MGUH, and Ferrari saw opportunity where others saw constraint. But to understand why this works, you need to see what Ferrari changed that no other team considered. Technical Directive 042 banned aerodynamic influence via exhaust thrust. Ferrari's system operates on thermal boundary effects instead. The Spirit of Regulations clause has only been invoked 3 times in modern Formula 1. Internal Fiorano data suggests Ferrari gained 0.3 seconds in Sector 2 through exhaust management. What no broadcast covered is this: the system's effectiveness depends on ambient temperature. This is a philosophical reimagining of where the engine ends and aerodynamics begin. If the FIA accepts Ferrari's interpretation, they gain an uncopiable advantage. If rejected, the championship shifts overnight. But to understand the engineering behind this gambit, we need to look at what Ferrari actually built. The next section reveals how a small flap creates an effect that was supposed to be extinct. Ferrari calls it FTM, Flow Thermodynamic Management. The team moved the differential 87mm rearward for a variable geometry flap inside a 23mm cavity. This flap modulates gas energy, keeping the turbo spooled between 11,200 and 11,800 revolutions per minute during lift and coast. But here is what the data does not show. CFD simulations reveal a 4.2% increase in rear downforce without added drag. The system works best in slow corners like Miami sectors 1 and 3, where SF26 previously lost 0.18 seconds per lap to Red Bull. Pat Simons recently observed the line between innovation and circumvention has never been thinner. What no broadcast covered is this: the effect scales with ambient temperature. This solution is baked into the car's architecture. Rivals cannot copy it with a mid-season upgrade, but dependence on precise engine mapping creates vulnerability. If the turbo falls outside that narrow RPM window, the benefit vanishes, and that is where the story shifts from engineering to human execution, because the drivers now hold the key to making this work under pressure. Charles Leclerc has become the human testbed for Ferrari's gamble. His throttle precision shaped the 11,500 RPM window that makes FTM work. Carlos Sainz required a separate ECU map for low grip, creating a 0.15 seconds per lap delta in simulation. The Tifosi demand a statement. That pressure lands on Frederic Vasseur. Internal telemetry shows Leclerc extracts maximum FTM benefit in Sector 2's stadium section, gaining 0.22 seconds where rivals lose time. Ferrari's championship deficit means Miami is a must-win scenario, but here's what the paddock is not talking about. The system's narrow window demands perfect execution. What no broadcast covered is this: Sainz's different mapping suggests the system may not work for all driving styles. This is about whether Ferrari can trust their interpretation under race pressure. If Leclerc delivers, the narrative shifts to can anyone stop them? If the system falters, the championship math becomes unforgiving, and that is where this story gets complicated, because the real battle is not just on track, it is happening in rival garages preparing their response. The next section reveals how those teams are fighting back. Red Bull, Mercedes, and McLaren are already fighting back. Christian Horner's public calm masks private urgency. Toto Wolff tasked engineers with finding weaknesses in Ferrari's interpretation. Andrea Stella put it plainly: innovation that rewrites rules mid-season belongs in the working group. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. Red Bull filed a formal request for clarification with the FIA. What the data actually shows is Mercedes' simulation points to a vulnerability. Ferrari's system could accelerate rear tire degradation on the C4 compound by an estimated 8% in Miami's 32-degree temperatures. Inside rival garages, engineers study exhaust flow masking, a counter using their own exhaust to disrupt Ferrari's effect. What no broadcast covered is this: 3 teams jointly requested an emergency technical working group session. This is about how the sport responds when a technical solution threatens competitive balance. If Ferrari gains even a small advantage, championship dynamics shift overnight. But the real weapon may not be a protest. It could be a counter-innovation already in the wind tunnel, and that is where this story gets complicated, because the next section reveals what Miami really decides for the title fight. Miami's stadium section is where Ferrari's gamble lives or dies. The FTM system projects a 0.22 seconds per lap advantage in Sector 2, but that gain comes with a hidden cost. The system increases exhaust temperatures by 47 degrees Celsius, potentially accelerating rear tire degradation on C4 by an estimated 8%. In a race where every stop matters, that could erase the advantage. In a sprint format, Ferrari might gain 3 positions off the line, but risk losing them if tires fall off the window. Championship math tells a starker story. If Leclerc wins and Verstappen finishes 5th, the gap closes to 18 points. But if banned post-race, Ferrari loses all Miami points. Toto Wolff faces a dilemma: protest and risk retaliation, or stay silent and let Ferrari build momentum. The spirit of regulations debate is worth 25 points per race. Paddock Intel confirms the FIA scheduled a post-Miami technical review. The verdict could arrive before Barcelona, creating a 3-race uncertainty window, but there is one variable Ferrari cannot simulate, and it could unravel everything on race day. The next section reveals the 2 paths this season could take. Ferrari's fate rests with the FIA. The 2013 blown exhaust ban took 4 races from protest to enforcement. The 2022 porpoising directive arrived in 48 hours. Which model applies here could decide the championship. If approved, Ferrari gains a 3 to 4 race window of dominance. If intervened, they must redesign the SF26's rear end, a 6 to 8 week process. Championship modeling reveals the stakes. If FTM stands, Ferrari's title odds jump from 12% to 38%. If banned, they drop to 4%. Nico Rosberg's analysis cuts through the noise. When a team finds a gray area this big, the question is not is it legal, it is it sustainable? If Ferrari wins Miami cleanly, the narrative shifts to can anyone stop them? But here is what Ferrari's calculators may have missed: the court of public opinion. The Tifosi's passion is a force multiplier, but only if the win feels earned. This is the part that changes everything, because whichever path we take, one thing is certain: Formula 1 will never be the same after Miami. And that brings us to the final question: not whether Ferrari can win, but whether the sport is ready to accept what they created. Miami is not just another race. It is a referendum on innovation, where engineering meets regulation. If Ferrari's system stands, interpretation becomes the ultimate performance differentiator. If banned, we reaffirm that Formula 1's rules are living documents. The Tifosi, skeptics, and neutrals watch the same moment but see very different stories. This story does not end with a checkered flag. It ends with a question echoing through the season. Can a sport built on strict rules survive when those rules are tested at their limit? The answer will define not just who wins in 2026, but how the next chapter of Formula 1 is written. When that SF26 pulls out of the garage, listen closely. You will not just hear an engine, you will hear the sound of a boundary being tested.